weakening, we gotta still stay weather aware. And because of the state of emergency, it is so important for you to be on the lookout for price gouging. Price gouging is when a business raises the price on goods or services higher than what's reasonable. Here is what you can do if you see prices that are just plain outrageous. You can call the two numbers you see right there on your screen to reach Georgia's Consumer Protection Division. You can also fill out an online form at consumer.ga.gov. Price gougers could be fined up to $5,000 per violation.
Hey, welcome to Dino Reacts, where we take ignorance to excellence. I've been gone for a while. I've been dealing with some personal things with my life and my family, but I'm happy to be back in here making content. Today we're going to talk about and learn about price gouging. You know, that's a big part of Kamala Harris's campaign to be president. I would like to understand more about it. So as you saw from the clips before, that's what they're proposing. But what we're going to learn today is how my boy Thomas Sowell talks about price gouging. And so we can get a deeper insight, so we can go down the path of more learning and more excellence. So as always, let's get after it. Whew, we're back.
Years ago, when I taught at Brandeis, I traveled from California to Massachusetts and discovered that my auto insurance rates had doubled. And since Los Angeles is not a small village or something, you wonder, why does that happen? Now, at about the same time, many other people were upset because Massachusetts had the highest auto insurance premiums in the country. The political answer was not to say, why are these premiums so high? What fact are they conveying? But it was to control the premiums. In fact, they launched an investigation of the insurance industry, the net result of which was they discovered that insurance companies were losing money in Massachusetts, charging the highest auto insurance premiums in the country. Now, anyone who's ever seen Massachusetts drivers will know that there's no mystery as to why those premiums are so high. The only place where you can regularly see drivers changing lanes in the tunnel during the rush hour is in the Callahan Tunnel in Boston. When I taught at Brandeis, I can recall driving to work on the right-hand side of the street and being surprised to see a tractor trailer pass me on the right on the shoulder of the road. The only place where I've seen emergency vehicles with their sirens on, having to jam on the brakes because someone did a left turn in front of them, is in Massachusetts. But of course, people didn't want to hear what the prices were telling them, and so the answer was to control the prices themselves. There have been many other areas in which there have been price controls. They have a standard, really stereotypical pattern. One is that you reduce the supply of whatever is being controlled. Not surprising, since people do less when they're paid less. The other is that you reduce the quality of what's being controlled, because higher quality is costlier than lower quality. And when you force the prices down, people then reduce the quality of what they're producing. One of the classic examples is housing. Wherever rent control has been put in, there is a shortage of apartments. In many places, there's a provision in the law that says this is only a temporary measure until the housing shortage is over. And sometimes they define that in terms of some percentage of vacancy and so on. And what they don't understand is that as long as that law is on the books, there will always be a shortage, and there will never be a time to take the law off the books. In Paris, they put a law like this on the books as an emergency measure during World War I. It was still in force when World War II broke out. In Sweden, they put one in the early days of World War II. Decades later, it was still there. Finally, for some reason, it occurred to someone to take off the price controls. Instantly, there was a housing surplus.
And I was just speaking to that about the pricing situation that Kamala Harris said that I heard about on CSNBC and CNN. They were definitely talking about putting a cap on grocery store prices. But when I did a deep dive into Kraft and the services that provide groceries here, I realized that from the pandemic until now, that all they were getting was basically under a 1% increase in their finances. When everybody's thinking that the price gouging and the raising prices that we have are a cause of these companies raising their prices, when it's really about the interest and all the free money the government has been giving away. And I think for some reason I think he's going to get into that, but for one, I do not agree with price fixing or price gouging at any cost, because it's going to lead to communism. It's going to lead to bread lines. You got to look at it like this: prices are made for a reason, so things stay on the shelves. Am I correct? So more items stay on the shelves. If you were to take, say, the price of milk, and right now milk is $2.99, just speaking hypothetically, and you make the price $1 fixed, what would stop some hoarder from buying all the milk on the shelves at $1 and leaving nothing for everybody else? So having the price at a reasonable price for all of us to have access to it is what prices are today. And the economy behind that, I'm just now getting into understanding, but I'm starting to figure it out. But let's get back to him.
The housing projects put up by the Swedish government suddenly began to have high vacancy rates, and in fact had to be bailed out because they couldn't fill them. I thought about rent control a few years ago when I visited West Berlin. It was still a difference in those days. And I could see this marvelous new modern city. And I came back and visited some of my relatives in the Bronx. And as I drove into the Bronx and I saw all these hulks of abandoned and boarded up buildings, I thought, suppose someone from Mars had come down here and you said to him, which of these two cities was bombed during World War II? He would pick the Bronx, because Berlin had recovered from the bombing, but the Bronx had not recovered from rent control.
Exactly.
The very notion of making things affordable misses the key point of
Before we continue on, what I think he's trying to say is, like, when you bring in a lower level of pricing and a lower level of citizen that can afford that pricing, you also bring in a culture that's not going to maintain the community and the environment. So when he's saying that Berlin was to recover because they just went back to a capitalistic system where the people there could afford to build the community, but people that tend to take in low income housing and low income areas actually can't afford a natural state of living, so they take on those low income housings but bring that culture and that mindset into that community, which in turn is going to bring down the value of the community, keep everything poor, which I see happening here out in the hoods in Los Angeles. There's a lot of low income housing here, but if you go into areas that have low income housing versus the areas over here that have regular standardized housing, even though the prices may be high, there is a complete difference in the communities and how they look and how they're maintained. So I really get his point on that.
market economy. An economy exists to make trade-offs, and a market economy makes the terms of those trade-offs plain with price tags representing the relative costs of producing different things. To have politicians arbitrarily change the price tags so that prices no longer represent the real costs is to defeat the whole purpose. Reality doesn't change when the government changes price tags. Price control hides costs rather than reducing them. Hidden costs continue to take their toll, and it is often a higher toll than when these costs are freely transmitted through the marketplace. Less supply, poorer quality, and longer waits have been the consequence of price controls for all sorts of goods and services in all sorts of societies and for thousands of years of human history. Whether in France during the 1790s, the Soviet Union after the Bolshevik Revolution, or in newly independent African nations during the past generation, governments have imposed artificially low prices on food. In each case, this led to artificially low supplies of food and artificially high levels of hunger. Why do we go through this whole rigmarole of passing around dollar bills and writing each other checks, except to force everyone to economize on the country's inherently limited resources? What about basic necessities? Shouldn't they be a right? The idea certainly sounds nice, but the very fact that we can seriously entertain such a notion as if we were God on the first day of creation, instead of mortals constrained by the universe we find in place, shows the utter unreality of failing to understand that we can only make choices among alternatives actually available. For society as a whole, nothing comes as a right to which we are entitled. Even bare subsistence has to be produced, and produced at a cost of heavy toil for much of human history. The only way anyone can have a right to something that has to be produced is to force someone else to produce it for him.
Facts.
The more things are provided as rights, the less the recipients have to work, and the more others have to carry their load. That does not mean more goods are available than under ordinary market production, but less. For the government to make some things more affordable is to make other things less affordable, and to destroy people's freedom to make their own trade-offs as they see fit in the light of economic realities rather than political visions. Trade-offs remain inescapable, whether they are made through a market or through politics. The difference is that price tags present all the trade-offs simultaneously, while political affordability policies arbitrarily fix on whatever is hot at the moment. That is why cities have been financing all kinds of boondoggles for years, while their bridges rusted and their roadways crumbled.
Facts.
Price fluctuations convey knowledge of changing trade-offs among changing options, as people weigh costs and benefits differently over time, with changes in tastes or technology. The totality of knowledge conveyed by the innumerable prices and their widely varying rates of change vastly exceeds what any individual can know or needs to know for his own purposes. How accurately these prices convey knowledge depends on how freely they fluctuate. The use of force to limit those fluctuations, or to change the relationship of one price to another, means that knowledge is distorted to represent not the terms of cooperation possible between A and B, but the force exerted by C. Looked at another way, the array of options people are willing to offer each other are reduced when force is applied to limit the level or the fluctuation of prices. And the array can shrink all the way to the vanishing point when the price is specified by a third party, if his specification does not happen to coincide with trade-offs mutually acceptable to entities contemplating transactions. Price fixing as a process cannot be defined by its hoped-for results. The set of options simultaneously acceptable to A and B is almost inevitably greater than the set of options simultaneously acceptable to A, B, and C, where...
Yes, well, I'm saying something's going through my head right now as he's saying that. That's just really got me thinking, like, why price gouging and price fixing, or price gouging is not happening and price fixing will not work. I'm looking at the situation of saying that you have 3 farmers selling oranges. Quality oranges, medium quality oranges, and crap oranges. Now, if somebody is saying that the person selling quality oranges is price gouging, selling more expensive oranges because he can make a better profit of, when really there's a different type of sect of oranges, to reason why the shittier, the lesser farmer or the less knowledgeable farmer is selling a lesser product, then that person can't get mad about that person taking more money because everybody wants quality. But if the government, as you said, a third party comes in and says across the board, everybody's oranges are the same price, what's the incentive of this guy to make quality oranges when this guy can sell them at the same price? That makes absolutely no sense. So what's going to end up happening is either he's going to lose the quality of oranges and start selling lower quality of oranges, which in turn is going to destroy his ability to take care of his business, because his business has been performing, and his farms, his agriculture, his water, his irrigation, his systems have all been on the regulations of putting out the best product. That's why he can sell a higher price on his oranges. But if he is now forced to sell lower oranges, that will destroy his productivity and in turn make less oranges, because he's going to stop doing it. So then the guy who's giving the crazier product, even though he's now has a consistent basis, a consistent selling market with the guy with the higher prices, we're all losing at the end. Tell me if I'm onto something, but don't you? Ignorance to excellence. I'm trying to figure it out, but there's something about that's driving me crazy.
C is the third-party observer with force, typically the government. The form in which force is applied to constrain price communication varies widely, including 1. establishing an upper limit beyond which force will be applied, fines, jail, confiscation, etc., to anyone charging and or paying such prices. 2. Establishing a lower limit. 3. Indirectly raising some prices by taxing particular items more so than others, and indirectly lowering some prices by subsidizing the product with assets forcibly transferred from the taxpayers, rather than having the product paid for only by assets voluntarily transferred by consumers of that product. The use of force is emphasized here not simply because of the incidental unpleasantness of force, but because the essential communication of knowledge is distorted when what can be communicated is circumscribed.
Well, as you can see there, it's really a lot to unload about what's really going on when it comes to price fixing and price gouging. And I really don't consider it to be a smart decision, because it takes away our ability as a consumer or an individual business owner to dictate, based upon our services at hand, what prices we're going to put out there. And I really don't think, all in all, that anybody is really raising their prices because they have to. No, it's because of supply, demand, gas, agriculture, everything that goes along with the business. And then if you have, like I said before, somebody putting out a inferior product at the same price of an expensive product, that's going to eventually lead to famine and a breakdown of the system. And that's just not how it eventually works. And if you have the third party like the government, and here in the capitalist system, we try to keep the government out of our lives. If they're going to come in and saying that you guys have to do things this way, they're going to end up paying a subsidy to the more expensive restaurants so they can maintain their factories. So that's going to make now them dependent upon the government to fund their organization instead of the product they want to sell. And how long is that going to hold up? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to be trying to really understand and figure this out going forward, because I do not agree that America in whole and companies are price gouging at all. And I do not believe in the government price fixing, because it doesn't work. We need to stay in the free market so we can continue to do things according to the system. And now, this is some of the things that Thomas Sowell was saying, like prices are there for a reason. They're not that way just because somebody decided to raise them. And right now, currently in America, a lot of our price gouging simply comes from the fact that we've been spending too much money. So we forced it now onto the individual businesses to recoup all of their losses. You can see my brain just going all over the place trying to figure it out, but this is what learning is. And I'm happy to be a part of this journey. It's been a long couple of weeks for me, and I'm glad I'm back. I'm glad on this back of education and raising my mind up, and I'm happy that you guys are with me. So let's keep this going. Woo! Once again, thank you guys for watching Dino Reacts. And if you like my content, like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, chef's kiss. Mwah.